My name is Avery Dalton, and as the clock struck midnight, I was standing on the rooftop of my building in Boston, surrounded by the only people who have ever truly felt like family, my chosen family. The city below shimmered under a bloom of fireworks, the cold air biting at my cheeks, the champagne still fizzing in my glass. Just as everyone around me shouted, "Happy New Year," my phone lit up, vibrating non-stop against my palm. "Sister, Mia." Her voice exploded through the speaker, frantic, almost breathless. "What did you do?" I let my eyes drift back to the skyline, to the glittering river and the snow-dusted rooftops stretching toward the horizon. A small smile tugged at my lips. "Did you read my New Year's message?" I asked softly. She went silent, but the panic in her breathing said enough. "And before I take you deeper into what that message was, let me ask you this. If you overheard your own family plotting to humiliate you right as the new year begins, what would you do? And where are you listening from tonight? Let me know, so I won't feel alone stepping into this year." Growing up in the Dalton household meant growing up inside a perfectly ironed world, one stitched together with academic prestige, polite dinner conversations about economic theory, and an unspoken expectation that excellence was the only acceptable language. My family lived in a brownstone just outside Back Bay, the kind of place with shelves lined in journals instead of photo albums, and a dining table that had hosted more professors than relatives. My father, a well-known economics lecturer, carried himself with the calm certainty of a man who believed numbers were the only truth worth respecting. My mother worked as a content director for a major science magazine, someone who could quote entire sections of peer-reviewed studies but couldn't remember the last time she asked me how I was really doing. And then there was Mia, my older sister, the dermatology prodigy, the golden child polished to perfection. She was the kind of daughter parents brag about at faculty mixers, medically gifted, socially graceful, unfailingly traditional. Her degrees hung across the living room wall like awards in a museum, each frame reflecting back at me with a subtle reminder: this is what success looks like. I, on the other hand, was the anomaly in this orderly ecosystem. From the moment I picked up my first marker, I was obsessed with drawing, sketching, animating, creating little worlds on scrap paper, while my parents gently pushed textbooks and math Olympiad prep packets across the table. They called me imaginative the way people call a storm. Interesting, polite, but wary. When I discovered motion design in middle school, that fascination only grew. Layers, textures, visual effects, storytelling, those were my equations. Those were the problems I wanted to solve. But in the Dalton family, anything outside the academic mold was treated as a hobby at best, a phase at worst. By high school, I had been labeled the artsy one, said with the same tone one uses for a child who stubbornly refuses to grow out of coloring books. "Avery's talented. In her own way," my mother would say at holiday dinners, followed by a tight smile that apologized on my behalf. My father tried to be supportive, though his support always came with a condition: just make sure you have something serious to fall back on. And Mia? She never missed an opportunity to tilt her head and ask, "So, what exactly do you do again?" As if my entire life were a punchline waiting to land. Still, there was one night each year when expectations grew even sharper: New Year's Eve. For the Daltons, it wasn't just a holiday, it was a showcase. My parents hosted their annual winter academic gala, an event so formal and meticulously planned you'd think Harvard itself had commissioned it. The guest list was a who's who of academia. Harvard economists, MIT researchers, editors of major journals, tech policy experts, award-winning scientists. Polished shoes, velvet dresses, champagne poured only after a short speech about intellectual community and growth. Every year, I stood in that crowd of polished brilliance like a smudge on a glass window, visible, tolerated, but slightly out of place. If there was one thing my family excelled at, it was comparison: polished, subtle, but cutting in all the places that mattered. Even after I graduated from MIT with a degree in computer science, the pride in my parents' eyes flickered for only a moment before dissolving into cautious concern. They were relieved I had made it into a serious field, but that relief evaporated the day I walked away from my corporate job at a big tech company in Cambridge. Most people assumed leaving was reckless. To my family, it was unforgivable. The truth was simpler. I hated everything about that world. The fluorescent lights that hummed like they resented you. The endless performance reviews disguised as growth conversations. The feeling that every piece of creativity had to pass through 12 layers of approval before it meant anything. I didn't spend 4 years building a brain full of ideas just to watch them die in committee meetings, so I left, quietly, deliberately. And for the first time in my life, I felt like I was breathing my own air. I became a digital artist and VFX animator, working with indie game developers, musicians, and creators who cared more about vision than titles. I spent nights animating nebula explosions, building 3D worlds, creating motion graphics for music videos that echoed in neon colors. My inbox filled with requests from small studios and creative collectives, some chaotic, some brilliant, all of them alive in a way my corporate job had never been. But in the Dalton household, nothing killed a conversation faster than the words, "I'm an artist." At every family gathering, I braced for impact the moment someone asked about work. It always started the same way, polite interest from a stranger, then the slow shift into awkward silence once my mother or father stepped in to translate my career into something understandable. "Avery is experimenting with creative tech right now," my mother would say, as if I were dabbling in pottery. My father would add, "She'll return to the corporate world eventually." And Mia, always ready with a smirk, delivered the finishing blow. "So, when are you getting a real job?" Or, "VFX? Is that even a career path?" Sounds unstable. Or the one that always made the room chuckle politely. "Artists are fun, but not exactly long-term planners, right?" If I mentioned a project, Mia waved it off as cute. If I mentioned a client, she asked whether they paid in exposure. At one Thanksgiving dinner, a professor from Harvard asked about my latest animation project. Before I could open my mouth, my mother answered for me. "Avery just enjoys playing with digital art. It keeps her busy." I laughed along, pretending it didn't sting. Pretending it didn't remind me of every time I had been measured against Mia's achievements and found lacking. Still, I kept trying. That was the thing about being the odd one out, you cling to hope even when it feels foolish. I once made a fully animated tribute video for my father's birthday, compiling decades of family photos into a glowing, moving timeline. A project that took me over a week. At the party, he watched it, nodded, said, "Nice," and immediately turned back to a discussion about economic modeling. Another year, I designed a motion graphic portrait for my mother, her profile merging with constellations and ink strokes, a visual representation of her love for science. She opened it, stared for half a second, and said, "You should have saved your time, honey. A framed photo would have been fine." It sat on the mantel for 2 days before quietly disappearing. And maybe the worst part wasn't the dismissal, but the way they believed they were being kind. My parents didn't think they were hurting me. They thought they were grounding me, making me realistic, preventing their younger daughter from becoming a cautionary tale. But what they didn't see, what they never asked to see, was the world I was building outside their narrow expectations. They didn't know about the musicians who cried seeing my work breathe life into their songs. They didn't know about the children who sent me emails telling me the game animations I made inspired them to start drawing. They didn't know about the indie studio who told me my effects saved their launch trailer. They didn't know because they never asked. And so, every year, every holiday, every winter academic gala, I swallowed their jokes and endured their chuckles and pretended I didn't hear the pity behind every question. Because I wanted to belong. I wanted to be part of the Dalton world even when it refused to make space for me. As December crept toward its final days, the Dalton household buzzed with its usual New Year's Eve anticipation. Even though I had slowly distanced myself from the winter academic gala over the years, my parents never stopped reminding me that it was the family's most important night. So when they scheduled a video call the week before the event, I braced myself, expecting the annual script about dress codes and professional behavior. What I didn't expect was how unusually enthusiastic they were. My father appeared first on the screen, adjusting his glasses, the background already filled with neatly stacked event programs. My mother hovered beside him, her expression bright with the kind of pride I rarely saw directed at me. "Avery," she began, "this year's gala is going to be special. Truly special." My father added, "We're live streaming it on the magazine's website. It's going to reach thousands of viewers, colleagues, students, even the editorial board. A very distinguished audience." He said the word distinguished the way someone might say sacred. I nodded politely, trying to match their excitement even though I knew how little the gala had ever meant to me. Then my mother delivered her annual request, no warning. "Avery, sweetheart," she said, tilting her head with that familiar mixture of concern and condescension. "Just promise you'll dress appropriately this year. And please, don't do anything too," she paused, searching for a word that wouldn't offend herself, "too eccentric. You know how creative you can be." I knew what she meant. Don't talk too much, don't mention my projects. Don't bring up my clients, don't dare be proud of the life I built. "Of course, Mom," I answered, smiling tightly. But inside, something flickered, something softer, something hopeful. Because a few hours before that call, I had opened an email that nearly made me fall off my chair. A major game studio, one whose art team I had admired for years, had reached out. Not with a question. Not with a trial task. But with an offer. A real collaboration proposal. They'd seen my animations through a mutual contact and wanted me to help develop visuals for their upcoming release. It wasn't a contract yet, but it was more real than anything my family had acknowledged about my career in years. And for once, I wanted to share it. I wanted to walk into that gala, look my parents in the eye, and tell them something that would finally make them see me not as a deviation from the Dalton standard, but as someone carving her own path. I imagined it. The brief surprise on their faces, the hesitant pride that might follow, the sense of belonging I'd been craving since childhood. So I leaned into the fantasy. I let myself believe that this year, the Winter Academic Gala could be different. That maybe my family might finally recognize I wasn't failing, wasn't drifting, wasn't lost. I was building something. Something they had never bothered to understand. I spent the week preparing. Not because they expected it, but because I genuinely wanted to share a piece of myself. I picked out an outfit that felt like a blend of their world and mine, a simple black jumpsuit with subtle iridescent embroidery along the sleeves, reminiscent of digital constellations. Just a hint of my artistic fingerprint, nothing eccentric, nothing that would embarrass them. I wrapped small gifts for everyone. Customized motion, graphic prints on acrylic, images that blended family memories with abstract light patterns. I spent hours perfecting them, hoping maybe naively that these visual snapshots would mean something this time. And then, because I wanted to offer something truly magical, I created an augmented reality visual. A cascade of fireworks that would burst into personalized shapes when viewed through a phone. My parents would see scientific formulas. Mia would see skin cell structures morphing into glitter. My father would see economic graphs dissolve into color. For once, I wanted my art to speak their language. I wanted my work to feel like a bridge. So yes, I was hopeful. Foolishly hopeful, in hindsight. I imagined the look on my father's face when I told him about the studio collaboration. I imagined my mother finally smiling at something I made. I imagined Mia stepping back, just once, and saying, "Wow." What I didn't imagine, what I could never have prepared for, was what I would hear in that house. The whispering, the planning. The betrayal spoken so casually it might as well have been part of the gala's logistics. I walked into that night hoping for connection. Instead, I walked into the moment, my world with them quietly, irreversibly cracked. And all the hope I carried began turning into something else entirely. I arrived at my parents' house earlier than usual that evening, my laptop tucked under my arm, ready to help them set up the live stream for the gala. Their home, already warm with soft lighting and the hum of classical music, felt strangely welcoming, almost enough to make me believe the hope I had been carrying all week wasn't misplaced. The catering crew moved in and out of the kitchen, polished glassware lined the counters, and the living room was arranged like a stage, with a projector set up to display the evening's presentations. My father had insisted I come early since I understood technology better, and for once, that felt like appreciation. I slipped upstairs to check the audio equipment, passing the hallway lined with framed diplomas, my father's PhD, my mother's editorial awards, Mia's medical certifications. My MIT degree hung there too, noticeably smaller, tucked to the side like a footnote. As I headed toward the guest room where the streaming computer was set up, I passed the half-open door to the dressing room. I wasn't planning to stop. I wasn't planning to listen. But then I heard my name. My mother's voice, calm, composed, the same tone she used when editing manuscripts. "So, Mia," she said, "you'll be introducing the family accomplishments slideshow, correct?" "Yes," Mia replied. "I've arranged everything. Dad's awards, your editorial features, my clinic expansions. It flows well." I smiled faintly. It was typical Dalton achievements presented like museum exhibits. Then my mother lowered her voice, though not enough. "And the segment for Avery? You added it?" I froze. Mia let out a small laugh, one I had heard too often, light, dismissive, threaded with superiority. "Of course I did. I named it the reality check segment. Thought it sounded educational." My stomach tightened. I edged closer, each word hitting harder. My mother asked, "What did you end up putting in it?" "Well," Mia said, flipping through something papers, "maybe screenshots. I found those old photos from when she was depressed during senior year. You remember, the ones where she barely smiled?" My mother hummed approvingly. "Yes, those will make the message clearer." Mia continued, far too casually. "I also included a few of her abandoned projects, those unfinished commissions she never posted. And," she added with a hint of pride, "some negative comments people left on her socials. There's even a meme someone made mocking digital artists." I think it illustrates the point perfectly. My chest went cold. My mother's response was soft, almost reassuring. "Good. It's time she sees the consequences of refusing to grow up." Mia agreed. "Exactly. She needs to understand that passion doesn't mean stability. The audience will understand. Maybe the embarrassment will finally push her into a real job." I pressed a hand against the wall to steady myself. My breath felt lodged somewhere between my ribs. They weren't just planning to belittle me, they were planning to publicly humiliate me. At their gala. In front of academics, colleagues, strangers. And they said it so calmly, so rationally, as if this cruelty were a form of guidance. I wanted to step back, to leave, to scream. But I couldn't move, not yet. My father's footsteps approached, and I instinctively held my breath. He entered the room, his tone clipped as always. "Let's review everything. After Mia's reality check, I'll make the announcement." "Which one?" Mia asked. "About cutting off financial support," he said plainly. "It will reinforce the message that she needs to pursue a serious career starting this year." My mother added, "Even though she hasn't taken money from us in years, the guests don't need to know that. It's symbolic." Symbolic. They were going to humiliate me with fake narratives just to reinforce their version of reality. Then Mia said something that cracked whatever hope I still had left. "By the way, I saw that email Avery got from that gaming company. She's so excited, like it proves something." My father gave a low chuckle. "Studios like that are always looking to fill their diversity quotas. It's not about talent." My mother murmured, "Exactly. Someone needs to keep her grounded before she embarrasses herself." Before she embarrasses them, she meant. I didn't wait to hear anything else. Something inside me snapped silently, not anger, not tears, but the clean, quiet break of something that had been strained for years. I backed away from the door, heart pounding, vision blurred as the truth settled over me like falling snow. They were never going to see me. Not as I was. Not even if I lit the entire sky with my art. My hands shook as I grabbed my coat, slipping out through the side door while the house buzzed behind me with preparations for the perfect academic showcase. The cold outside hit me like a slap. Snow swirled through the air, catching in my lashes as I stumbled down the walkway. I didn't care where I was going, I just needed distance. I walked into the night, into the biting wind, the flakes melting on my cheeks, as if the sky itself was crying for me. But I wasn't crying. Not yet. I felt hollow, scraped clean. Betrayal has a way of freezing you before it burns you. And beneath that numbness, something else began to stir, something steady, something sharp, something I hadn't felt in years: clarity. The kind that only comes when everything you hoped for collapses at your feet. I didn't know it then, but that moment walking alone through the snow would be the beginning of everything that came next. The message. The pivot. The choice. And the version of myself that my family had never imagined I could become. The snow had already soaked through my shoes by the time I reached the end of the block, but I barely felt it. My breath fogged the air in sharp, uneven bursts as I kept walking, the cold doing nothing to numb the sting of what I had just overheard. My parents' voices replayed in my mind, calm, reasonable, almost clinical, discussing my public humiliation like it was an agenda item on a faculty meeting. By the time I reached the main road, my hands were trembling too hard to keep them in my pockets. I pulled out my phone and hit the one contact I always called when the world tilted off its axis. Theo. He picked up on the second ring, sounding half asleep and entirely unprepared for the storm about to hit him. Aves? It's freezing out. Where are you? That was all it took for the dam inside me to crack, not into tears, but into words. Pouring, messy, jagged words. I told him everything. Every detail of the reality check segment. Every cruel comment. Every distorted narrative my family planned to present. The fake financial cutoff, the mockery of my work. The dismissal of the game studio offer. And the worst part, the smug certainty that embarrassing me would help me grow up. Theo didn't interrupt. He let me talk until my voice went hoarse, until my anger finally caught up with my numbness and settled like fire in my chest. When I finally stopped, he exhaled slowly. Avery, he said, you need to come over. Now. His apartment was only a 15-minute walk, but the snow made it feel like an hour. By the time I reached his building, the world looked like it had been erased and rewritten in white. Theo opened the door the moment I buzzed in, wrapped me in a blanket, and pushed a mug of something hot into my hands. Okay, he said. Start over, but slower this time. I did. And when I got to the part about the gala live stream, his eyebrows shot up. Wait, he said, they're streaming through our platform? I nodded. They said the magazine partnered with the company. Something about increasing visibility. Theo snorted. Visibility? Sure, but do they know? He trailed off, looking at me like he was waiting for the moment I'd connect the dots myself. It took a second. Then it hit me. Hard. Oh my God, I whispered. They don't know. Theo leaned back, arms crossed, watching my realization land. They didn't know I was one of the engineers who helped build that system. The system they were bragging about, the system they were using to humiliate me. I had spent 2 years helping design the back-end infrastructure for the platform moderation tools, content override features, emergency broadcast functions. I knew every line of code behind the live streaming interface. I had access. Full access. I could remove videos. Replace them. Insert overlays. Lock the screen. Freeze the feed. Redirect the stream entirely. Most people didn't even know those features existed. But I did. Because I had helped build them. Theo saw the spark in my eyes. You're thinking something, he said carefully. I shook my head at first. No, I'm not trying to ruin their event. I'm not going to sabotage anything. Good, he said, though his tone wasn't relieved, more curious. Then what? I stared into my mug, watching the steam curl upward. I don't want revenge, I said. Not like that. My voice cracked. I just want to tell the truth. Without being edited. Without being framed as the family embarrassment again. If they're going to use that stage to define me, then I want at least one moment where I get to define myself. Theo nodded slowly, understanding dawning in his expression. So, what are you thinking? And then, for the first time since I'd run out of my parents' house, something inside me steadied. I'm not going to the gala, I said. Let them wonder where I am. Okay. But at midnight, exactly midnight, the live stream is going to play a message. My message. Theo's lips tugged into the kind of smile he only gave when he knew I had crossed a threshold I wouldn't come back from. What kind of message? I took a long breath. Not a vengeful one. Not a wounded one. A clear one. A New Year's message, I said. A reminder that the person they think they can humiliate is not the person I am anymore. I wasn't going to expose them. I wasn't going to shame them. That was their language, not mine. My message would be honest, artistic, grounded in truth. It would say everything I had swallowed for years, but gently. Firmly. Without cruelty. Without spectacle. And most importantly, it wouldn't name a single person. The truth didn't need villains. It only needed clarity. Theo lifted his mug. To midnight, then. I raised mine. To boundaries. Outside, the snow kept falling thick, quiet, relentless. And for the first time in a long time, the cold didn't feel empty, it felt clean. Like a page turning. Like a year ending. Like something new beginning. I stayed at Theo's that night, planning, writing, sketching, animating, pouring everything my family never cared to see into a message meant not to punish them, but to free me. By dawn, the decision was sealed. I wouldn't step foot inside that gala. I wouldn't sit quietly while they unveiled humiliation disguised as guidance. At midnight, the world they built would hear my voice. Not loud. Not angry. Just true. I spent the next 24 hours building the kind of peace I had always wished my family would look at and truly see. Not as a hobby, not as a phase, but as work, real work, shaped by years of learning, failing, growing, and rebuilding myself in ways they never cared to understand. Theo cleared space in his living room, brought out an extra monitor, and set up a workstation like we were preparing for a launch at the company. He didn't hover. He just kept the kettle running and sat nearby in case I needed a second pair of eyes. The silence between us was comfortable, steadying. It made it easier to focus, easier to breathe. I opened a blank project on my animation software and stared at it for a moment, letting everything settle: the hurt, the betrayal, the clarity that followed. Then I began. The video started with fragments. Literal fragments. Shattered pieces of last year, gray and static falling into a quiet void. I layered in glitching textures, fractured lines of light, scraps of shapes drifting like debris in slow motion. It was how I felt leaving that house, broken open, stripped down, suspended in a cold quiet. As the seconds passed, the fragments stopped falling and began rearranging. Slowly. Hesitantly. Instead of forming what they were before, they built something new. Sharp edges softened. Colors breathed back into the frame. Dust turned to embers and embers into sparks. And then, almost imperceptibly, a soft golden glow grew from the center, illuminating the entire screen. This was the moment everything shifted. The broken pieces didn't disappear. They didn't vanish or get overwritten. They became part of the new shape, the new design, the new year. No metaphors louder than necessary. No pointed callouts. Just growth, quiet, intentional, mine. I built the soundtrack myself, a low hum that rose into warm chords, like a sunrise layered beneath snowfall. It felt like standing at the edge of something better. And over the glowing animation, I added 3 lines, simple, deliberate, each fading in like breath on a winter morning. You can't cut off someone who walked away years ago. That one came from hearing my father plan to cut off financial support I never received. The absurdity had stung, but the truth sat deeper. I had emotionally walked away from them long before they made any announcement. They just didn't notice. Respect doesn't require a degree. A quiet refusal of the hierarchy. They worshipped the belief that worth came from credentials, accolades, academic pedigree. I had lived under that weight for too long. This line wasn't defiance, it was release. I choose kindness even when you choose spectacle. This one hurt the most to write because choosing kindness didn't mean I wasn't angry. I was. Deeply. But weaponizing humiliation wasn't my language. My response would be gentle, honest, and grounded. Everything theirs wasn't. These lines weren't directed at them, but they were born from them. I didn't need to name anyone. Anyone who listened would know the message was personal without it ever being petty. Theo leaned over my shoulder halfway through, eyes widening a little. "This is beautiful," he said. "It's powerful without being vengeful." "That's the goal," I whispered. "Truth, not revenge." I added a final flourish, a soft transition from the glowing animation to a clean black screen with white text. "Happy New Year. Choose yourself." Nothing more. Nothing less. When the video ended, the timestamp read 0 hours and 48 seconds, short enough to hold attention, long enough to breathe. It was ready. And then, while the render bar crawled across the screen, I opened a new project, my portfolio. For years, I had kept my portfolio hidden, unfinished, patched together in pieces because I was too afraid it would never be good enough, especially according to Dalton standards. But not tonight. Tonight, it would be complete. A gallery of my work, game effects, AR visuals, motion art, interactive elements, not curated for my family. Curated for me. For the people who might actually value it. And for the game studio who was waiting for my reply. At 1 minute after my message would appear on the gala livestream, I scheduled the portfolio site to go live. A new beginning layered onto another. A soft boundary drawn in digital ink. When everything was exported, scheduled, coded, and double-checked, I leaned back in my chair and felt a strange, unexpected warmth settle over me. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't creating to impress my family. I wasn't creating to justify myself. I was creating to reclaim myself. And when the clock struck midnight on New Year's Eve, the world would know not who my family believed I was, but who I had chosen to become. The message was ready, and so was I. The Winter Academic Gala began with the kind of polished confidence my parents thrived in. The ballroom had been transformed into a cathedral of intellect, silver tablecloths, towering floral arrangements designed to look like crystalline snowflakes, and a stage framed by soft blue lighting that made every guest appear as though they were glowing. Professors, researchers, editors, and clinical directors mingled beneath chandeliers, champagne flutes in hand, whispering about breakthroughs, publications, and departmental gossip. My parents moved through the crowd like they owned the place, my father in his tailored navy suit, my mother in a pearl-white gown, Mia in a deep burgundy dress that shimmered slightly every time she turned. All three of them looked polished, elegant, proud, and entirely unaware of what was coming. At 9 p.m. sharp, as tradition demanded, my father tapped the microphone. Conversations faded instantly, the crowd stilled like students before a lecture. "Welcome everyone to the Dalton family's annual Winter Academic Gala," he began, smiling with well-practiced warmth. "Tonight, we celebrate achievement, dedication, and the intellectual community we are honored to be part of." Applause rippled politely through the room. My mother followed with a short speech about the significance of scientific integrity in an age of misinformation. Mia then stepped up for her segment, cheeks pink with excitement and nerves. She scanned the audience, lifted her chin, and smiled at the cameras that were broadcasting everything live on the magazine's website. "And now," she said, "we'd like to present a special video segment highlighting the accomplishments of the Dalton family this year." The crowd leaned in. Cameras zoomed. The livestream counter ticked upward as more viewers joined online. "We call this our..." She glanced down at her note cards, "reality check segment." She sounded proud of the title. She truly had no idea. The lights dimmed. The room fell silent except for the soft hum of the projector. The massive screen behind Mia flickered once, twice, then froze. A few guests murmured. Someone whispered, "Is it buffering?" Mia clicked frantically on the remote, her smile tightening. "Just a moment. Technical glitch," she said into the mic, forcing a laugh. She tried again. Nothing. My father stepped forward, tapping his tablet. My mother crouched beside the laptop feeding the projector. But the screen remained stubbornly, ominously black. Then, suddenly white text appeared. Clean. Centered. Unmissable. The scheduled content has been replaced by the creator's New Year's message. The ballroom fell utterly silent. You could have heard snow falling outside. Several guests straightened, eyebrows raised. A few exchanged confused glances. One of the professors whispered, "Creator?" Mia's hand shook around the microphone. My father's jaw tightened. My mother looked like someone had just unplugged her spine. And before any of them could react, the screen faded into the first frame of my video. A slow cascade of broken shapes falling through darkness. Gasps echoed around the room. The fragments glowed faintly as they drifted, each piece rendered with such precision that even from the back of the hall, the motion felt hypnotic. The visuals shifted dust to embers, embers to sparks as the fragments began to rebuild into new forms. Every color shift, every movement, every soft hum rising beneath the soundtrack felt intentional, almost spiritual. The golden light bloomed in the center of the screen, warm and expansive. Conversations halted completely. A woman in the third row clasped her hands over her mouth. A researcher from MIT leaned forward as though studying the piece. My father stared up at the screen, stunned. My mother blinked rapidly, her face flushing a deep, embarrassed red. Mia looked like she couldn't decide whether to drop the microphone or run. Then the words appeared. One line at a time. "You can't cut off someone who walked away years ago." A few guests turned their heads slowly toward my parents. "Respect doesn't require a degree." Someone whispered, "That's beautiful." Another murmured, "Who would try to embarrass an artist like this?" "I choose kindness even when you choose spectacle." The room felt suspended in time. A kind of reverent quiet had settled over the crowd, not scandalized, not entertained, but moved. Deeply moved. When the video's final frame, "Happy New Year. Choose yourself," faded into darkness, the ballroom remained silent for a beat too long. Then, unexpectedly, a soft ripple of applause began near the front. It grew, hesitant at first, then stronger. Genuine. Emotional. People weren't clapping for my family. They were clapping for me. For the art. For the honesty. For the courage they perceived even without knowing the whole story. Meanwhile, my parents stood frozen. My mother looked like she was calculating how quickly she could shut down the livestream. My father kept tapping on his tablet, but nothing happened. Mia swallowed hard, her face pale under the stage lights. "Ladies and gentlemen," she finally stammered, "there seems to have been a technical error." But the guests weren't listening. A group of professors whispered to one another, shaking their heads in disbelief at the technical failure, at the emotional weight of the video, maybe even at the implication that my family had intended something far less noble. One guest, a senior editor, turned to my mother and asked bluntly, "Why was this piece hidden?" "It's extraordinary." My mother's lips parted, but no sound emerged. She didn't have a script for this moment. She had never prepared for the possibility that my voice might be stronger than their control. As confusion swirled around the gala, the live stream continued running smoothly, broadcasting my message to thousands of viewers worldwide. And miles away, standing on a rooftop glowing with fireworks and surrounded by people who loved me for who I really was, I lifted my glass. The city exploded in light beneath me. My friends cheered, pulling me into their warmth. Someone wrapped an arm around my shoulders. "To new beginnings," Theo said, raising his glass. I smiled, feeling the cold air kiss my cheeks as the fireworks reflected in my eyes. The live stream played on. The gala spiraled into chaos. And far below, my New Year's message echoed through the digital world like a quiet, steady reclaiming of everything I had lost and everything I was finally choosing. But up there, on that rooftop, with my chosen family, I wasn't thinking about the chaos. I was thinking about the peace. The moment the last firework burst into the sky, my phone started vibrating again so violently it almost slipped from my hand. I didn't even need to look at the screen to know who it was. Mia. Of course it was Mia. I stepped a little away from my friends, letting the cold wind brush against my face as I answered. Her voice came through instantly, cracked with panic, breathless like she'd been running. What did you do? Avery, the whole auditorium saw that. 1. Behind her I could hear noise chairs scraping, voices overlapping, someone asking if the live stream could be restarted. The chaos I had imagined was now real, and Mia was standing in the center of it. But I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel guilty either, just calm. I didn't do anything, I said softly, looking out over Boston glittering under the new year. I shared my message. My experience. No one was named, no one was attacked, no one was humiliated. R4. She let out a sharp, shaking breath. Avery, people think we shamed you. They're asking why our presentations suddenly changed. They're asking what we were trying to hide. I closed my eyes, because you were, I said. No edge. No anger. Just truth. Silence. The kind that hits harder than shouting. When Mia finally spoke, her voice was smaller, thinner. We were just trying to help you grow up. There it was. The sentence that held years of condescension, years of dismissal, years of pretending cruelty was guidance. I tightened my grip on the phone. Embarrassment isn't help, I said. A spectacle isn't love. For a moment, the only sound was the faint hiss of fireworks fading behind me. I imagined Mia standing backstage at the gala, makeup perfect, dress immaculate, surrounded by professors and colleagues, and expectations everything she thought she had to be. And now, suddenly, faced with the consequences of something she had built. Her voice trembled. We didn't think you'd find out. I know, I replied. That's the problem. Another pause longer this time. Avery, she whispered, voice breaking. Why would you do this on New Year's Eve? And that was when I finally understood something. Mia wasn't just panicking because of the humiliation. She was panicking because I had stepped out of the role I was assigned, the quiet, apologetic, grateful for any scrap Avery. The Avery who stayed on script. I looked up at the sky, the last echo of celebration fading into the night. This year, I said gently, I'm stepping into my life, not your script. On the other end, Mia's breath hitched, then another, and another, until her breaths dissolved into quiet, stifled sobs. Avery, I didn't cut her off. I just waited. But nothing coherent came. Only grief. Shame, maybe regret, or maybe just the shock of a reality she had never imagined confronting. Eventually, the sobbing softened. A final shaky inhale. Okay, she whispered. Then the line went quiet. Not a click. Not a final word. Just silence. The kind that meant something had ended, and something else had begun. The days that followed felt strangely split, like two different worlds unfolding at once. In one world, the gala existed only as a trembling echo on my phone screen, the final fireworks still lingering in my memory. In the other world, my family's world, the gala had become a wildfire. By the next morning, inboxes were full. Professors who'd attended, editors who'd watched the live stream. Even a few well-known research directors had written enthusiastic emails to my parents and the magazine team. Not about the gala, not about the academic achievements they'd planned to highlight, but about my message. One email said the video was deeply moving. Another called it remarkably introspective, an artist's clarity in the face of expectation. One guest wrote to my mother personally, "Your daughter has a rare gift." I hope she continues creating work like this. My mother read that one aloud once, then deleted it so forcefully I half expected the keyboard to crack. She spent the morning pacing around the kitchen, snapping at every notification that came through. I can't believe people think this was intentional, she muttered. They think we endorsed that video. My father remained quieter. He sat at the dining table, scrolling through comments on the magazine's website, his face shifting between shock and contemplation. Every so often he would pause, rub his chin, and then scroll again. At one point, he murmured, "It was very well made." My mother shot him a look sharp enough to slice glass. That's not the point. He didn't argue. But he didn't withdraw the statement either. 2 days later, on a gray afternoon when the snow outside had turned to slush, someone knocked on my apartment door. I expected a package, maybe a neighbor. But when I opened it, Mia stood there. No makeup. Puffy eyes. Hair pulled back like she hadn't bothered to brush it. She looked small. Not physically, just stripped of the polished confidence she always wore like armor. "Avery," she whispered. "Can I come in?" Part of me wanted to tell her no, to protect the fragile peace I'd built in the days since the gala, but another part, older, gentler, stepped aside. She entered slowly, as if afraid the floor might crack under her. We sat opposite each other, me on the couch, her on the edge of the armchair, like she expected to be asked to leave at any moment. For a long time, she said nothing. She just stared at her hands twisting together in her lap. Finally, she inhaled, shaky. "It wasn't Mom," she said. "Or Dad." I tensed without meaning to. "What wasn't them?" She swallowed hard. Her eyes glistened. "The idea for the reality check video. The whole thing. It was me." Silence fell so sharply it felt like gravity had thickened. My heartbeat thudded in my ears. "You?" She nodded once, shame draining the color from her face. "They didn't tell me to do it. I told them, I convinced them it would help you. They went along with it because they thought I knew you better." I stared at her, searching for anger and finding only exhaustion. "Why?" Her response was barely a whisper. "Because I was jealous." The words hit the air like something breaking. She wiped her cheek quickly, as if embarrassed by the tear she hadn't meant to shed. "You always act like you don't care about what people think. You chase things you love, you make things out of nothing. I went the path everyone wanted. And sometimes I wondered if anyone even saw me or just expected things from me." She pressed her palms to her face. "When I saw you excited about that gaming studio offer, something in me twisted. I knew you'd shine if you told people at the gala. And I..." Her voice cracked. "I couldn't stand it. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." I let the quiet stretch between us, not as a punishment, but because I needed to understand the shape of this moment. Mia sobbing in my living room was not something I ever imagined seeing. When I finally spoke, my voice was steady. "Jealousy explains behavior," I said. "It doesn't excuse it." She nodded, crying harder. "I know. And you didn't just make a mistake, Mia. You planned it. You curated it. You were going to show the worst moments of my life on a stage. You crossed a line that can't be undone." "I know," she repeated, voice breaking. "I just wanted you to hear the truth." "Des?" I sighed a long, tired sigh pulled from years of swallowing hurt. "Then, here's the truth. I can't trust you right now." Her shoulders curled forward like the words physically pushed her back. She stood slowly, wiping her cheeks, unable to meet my eyes. "I'll go," she whispered. And she did quietly, like a shadow slipping out the door. When it closed behind her, I felt a strange mix of grief and relief. Losing illusion often hurts more than losing people. But an hour later, another notification lit up my phone. A new email. From the game studio. This time, not a proposal. A contract. A full collaboration offer, terms, timelines, and a note from the creative director. "Your New Year's message was extraordinary. If you're ready, we'd be honored to have you on the team." I stared at the screen, the words blurring for a moment as emotion pulled me under. In the middle of the chaos, amid the unraveling of everything I thought my family was, something new had begun. Something mine. A year can pass slowly, like winter melting grain by grain. Or it can pass the way mine did, quietly erupting into something I never expected. By the following December, my life looked nothing like the one I had walked away from on that snowy night outside my parents' house. I had moved into a bright apartment in Seaport, sunlight pouring through floor-to-ceiling windows every morning, casting soft gold over the space I'd slowly shaped into my own sanctuary. One room became my studio: clean hardwood floors, tall shelves filled with sketchbooks, VR rigs, tablets, motion capture gear, and walls pinned with concept art from the young artists who came to work with me. Because yes, somewhere along the way, a collaboration offer became a full-time partnership. And then that partnership grew into something larger. A small studio collective built for digital artists who felt like misfits in traditional spaces, the way I had for most of my life. We worked on game trailers, AR installations, music videos, interactive visual pieces. I hired interns, mentored college graduates, collaborated with creators I used to idolize from afar. My work flourished. But more than that, I flourished. And strangely, it all began with that one quiet message I'd released into the world on New Year's Eve. Somehow, the video that was never meant to be public became a talking point in digital art communities. It floated from one corner of the internet to another, passed around by animators, mental health advocates, academic forums, even a few mainstream media outlets. Articles called it a delicate, profound reflection on rebuilding oneself. One magazine described it as a whisper louder than a scream. I read that line twice, maybe 3 times, then I saved it. People emailed me asking how I made it. Students sent messages saying it inspired them to pursue art degrees. A director reached out saying he watched it every January to remind himself why he created in the first place. And yes, my parents saw all of it. They emailed occasionally. The tone was careful, deliberate, as if they were trying to step around shards of something fragile. They never apologized outright, but they acknowledged my success. They asked about my projects sometimes. They tried, in their own distant way. I kept the boundaries where they needed to be. No more pretending. No more shrinking. No more attending events where I was expected to play a part I no longer belonged to. We spoke, but with space between us. Space I needed, space I earned. Mia was a different story. She started therapy. Not because I asked her to, but because she finally saw the fractures she had been carrying since childhood. The pressure, the expectations, the fear of not being enough, which had twisted into jealousy that she took out on me. We weren't close yet. Healing wasn't magic. It was slow, quiet work. But she wrote occasionally. She apologized more than once. And for the first time in my life, her words felt real. Then came New Year's Eve again. My new rooftop wasn't as high as the building from last year, but it had wide wooden decking, strings of warm lights, and enough open sky to make the world feel bigger than the past. My chosen family gathered: Theo, my interns, a few of the artists from our collective, neighbors who had become friends. The air was cold, but the laughter rose like warmth between us. I set out mugs of hot cider, bowls of caramel popcorn, blankets for anyone who needed them. Music drifted through a small speaker, soft enough for conversations to float freely. As the countdown approached, someone tapped my shoulder. "Speech," Theo said, grinning. "Come on, founder privileges." Everyone turned toward me, glasses raised. I felt a flutter in my chest nerves, but not fear. I stepped forward, letting the night breeze brush against my cheeks. The city below sparkled, the water catching reflections of lights like flickering stars. This time last year, I began. I thought everything had fallen apart. I thought what happened at the gala was an ending. I paused, looking at the faces around me, faces I trusted, faces that chose me without conditions. But it wasn't an ending. It was a beginning. A reminder that sometimes the only way to start your real life is to stop living the one other people wrote for you. A murmur of agreement rippled through the group. I lifted my glass. To art, I said. To boundaries. To choosing yourself. And just as the countdown hit 10, 9, 8, I let the words settle in my heart. I'm finally home. Fireworks burst overhead, painting the sky in gold and lavender. Someone hugged me from behind. Theo clinked his glass against mine. And for the first time, New Year's didn't feel like a performance. It felt like truth. It felt like belonging. It felt like peace. The night thinned into laughter and music, and I found myself leaning on the railing, watching the colors ripple across the water. The world was loud with celebration, but my mind was quiet, steady, open, new. And before I end this story, before I step into another year, I want to ask you something. New Year doesn't always need fireworks to explode. Sometimes all it needs is the moment you finally say, enough, and walk into the life you choose. So tell me, where are you listening from tonight? And as the next new year approaches, what is the wish you want to begin your story with?